Racist cop laughs at black teen girl in court, then discovers she's a genius attorney. The Maricopa County Juvenile Court building loomed against the harsh Arizona sun, its modern glass facade reflecting the cloudless blue sky. Inside Courtroom 3, the air conditioning hummed steadily, creating an artificial chill that matched the cold atmosphere of the proceedings. Zarya Monroe sat alone at the defendant's table, her slender frame appearing even smaller against the imposing wooden furniture. At 17, she carried herself with a poise that belied her age, spine straight, chin lifted, eyes alert and observant. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she wore a crisp white button-down shirt with black slacks, the nicest outfit she owned, carefully ironed the night before in the tiny apartment she shared with her grandmother. Unlike the other teenagers who had appeared in court that morning, Zarya had no attorney beside her, no parent hovering anxiously nearby. Her grandmother Eloise, battling rheumatoid arthritis, couldn't manage the bus journey across town. The public defender assigned to her case had spent exactly 7 minutes with her before suggesting she plead guilty to reduce charges. Zarya had politely declined. "I'll represent myself," she had told him, her voice quiet but firm. The overworked attorney had shrugged, muttering something about another kid making things harder for herself before moving on to his next case. 3 weeks earlier, Zarya had been leaving AP Chemistry when she witnessed school security officer James Radley slam her classmate Marcus Washington against a locker. Marcus, a gentle giant on the debate team, had simply been running to make his bus. Officer Radley, a former police officer who'd been hired by South Phoenix High after retiring from the force, had shouted at Marcus to stop running like a criminal. Zarya had immediately pulled out her phone and started recording. When Officer Radley noticed, he demanded she stop. When she refused, citing her First Amendment rights, he'd called for backup. Officer Peter Danvers had arrived minutes later, confiscated her phone, deleted the video, not knowing Zarya had already backed it up to the cloud and arrested her for obstruction and interference with police procedure. Now she faced potential charges that could derail her college plans, early admission to Stanford, with a full scholarship, her ticket out of a neighborhood where police sirens were as common as ice cream truck jingles. At the prosecution table sat Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Walsh, a harried woman in her 40s who barely glanced at Zarya as she shuffled through her files. Beside her sat Officer Danvers, his blue uniform crisp, his expression smug, as he whispered something to Walsh that made her smile thinly. Danvers had a reputation at South Phoenix High. The students of color knew to avoid him. Zarya had documented 7 separate incidents where he'd stopped Black or Latino students for random searches, while white students walked by unbothered. She'd written about it for the school newspaper, which had earned her a meeting with the principal and a warning about making unfounded accusations. The unfounded accusations were now sitting in a secure cloud folder, along with the video of Marcus being assaulted, evidence she planned to present today despite having no legal training beyond Constitutional Law Club and hundreds of hours of research conducted over the past 3 weeks. All rise for the Honorable Judge Miranda Holbrook, the bailiff announced. Judge Holbrook entered briskly, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and reading glasses perched on her nose. She had a reputation for fairness, but also for running an efficient courtroom. She glanced at Zarya with mild surprise as she took her seat. "I see the defendant is representing herself," she noted, reviewing the file. "Ms. Monroe, are you certain you wish to proceed without counsel? The court can appoint—" "I'm prepared to represent myself, Your Honor," Zarya replied clearly. "I've studied the relevant statutes and case law. I understand the charges against me and believe I can adequately present my defense." Judge Holbrook's eyebrows rose slightly. "Very well. Let the record show that the defendant has waived her right to counsel after being advised of the availability of court-appointed representation." Officer Danvers leaned over to whisper something to Ada Walsh again, his smirk visible to Zarya. She caught the words, "Think she's Thurgood Marshall," and the quiet chuckle that followed. "The state may present its case," Judge Holbrook directed. Ada Walsh stood straightening her blazer. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of a student interfering with a school safety officer in the performance of his duties. On April 12th, Officer Danvers was called to assist with a situation at South Phoenix High School. Upon arrival, he found the defendant, Zarya Monroe, recording Officer Radley, while Officer Radley was attempting to subdue a student who had violated school policy. When asked to stop recording and step back, the defendant refused, creating a potentially dangerous situation. Officer Danvers was forced to confiscate her phone and place her under arrest when she continued to interfere and incite other students to join her disruption. Zarya made careful notes, her handwriting neat and precise. She had anticipated this narrative, a complete fabrication that painted her as an agitator rather than a witness documenting misconduct. "The state calls Officer Peter Danvers," Walsh announced. Danvers took the stand, swore his oath, and settled into the witness chair with the comfortable air of someone who had testified many times before. At 42, he had spent 15 years on the police force before transitioning to school security. His testimony was practiced portraying Marcus as aggressive and non-compliant, and Zarya as hostile and interfering with official procedure. "And what happened when you arrived on scene, Officer Danvers?" Walsh asked. "I observed the defendant recording with her phone approximately 3 feet from where Officer Radley was attempting to restrain a large male student who was resisting. She was shouting at Officer Radley to let the student go and telling other students to record everything. This was creating a dangerous situation where Officer Radley's attention was divided between controlling the resistant student and monitoring the growing crowd. What action did you take?" "I instructed the defendant to stop recording and step back. She refused, stating, and I quote, 'I know my rights, pig.' At that point, for the safety of everyone involved, I confiscated her phone and placed her under arrest for obstruction." Zarya's pen paused mid-note, her expression remaining neutral despite the blatant lie. She had said no such thing, and the video would prove it if she could get it admitted as evidence. "No further questions," Walsh concluded, returning to her seat with a satisfied nod. Judge Holbrook turned to Zarya. "Ms. Monroe, you may cross-examine the witness." Zarya stood smoothing her slacks. "Thank you, Your Honor." She approached the witness stand, maintaining a respectful distance. "Officer Danvers, you testified that I was approximately 3 feet from Officer Radley and the student he was restraining. Is that correct?" Danvers nodded confidently. "Yes, that's correct. And you stated that I was shouting at Officer Radley and encouraging other students to record. Is that also your testimony?" "Yes, that's what happened." Zarya nodded thoughtfully. Officer Danvers, are you aware that the hallway where this incident occurred is monitored by security cameras? A flicker of uncertainty crossed Danvers' face. I believe there are cameras in that area, yes. And these cameras record audio as well as video, correct? I'm not sure about the audio capabilities, Danvers replied, his confidence wavering slightly. I see. Officer Danvers, you also testified that I called you a derogatory name when you instructed me to stop recording. Do you stand by that statement? Absolutely. You said, "I know my rights, pig." Those were your exact words. Zarya maintained her composure, though her heart raced. One final question. Officer Danvers, when you confiscated my phone, you deleted the video I had recorded, correct? Danvers hesitated. I secured the phone as evidence. Any content would have been preserved for investigation. That wasn't my question, officer. Did you delete the video I recorded of Officer Radley's interaction with Marcus Washington? I don't recall specifically. Standard procedure would be to secure the device without altering its contents. Thank you, Officer Danvers. No further questions at this time, but I reserve the right to recall the witness. As Zarya returned to her seat, she noticed Officer Danvers exchange a look with Ada Walsh. The prosecutor's expression had shifted from confident to slightly concerned. The state called two more witnesses, Officer Radley, who corroborated Danvers' account, and Vice Principal Harriet Chen, who testified that Zarya had a history of challenging authority through her work on the school newspaper. When the state rested its case, Judge Holbrook turned to Zarya. Ms. Monroe, you may present your defense. Zarya stood her hand steady despite her nerves. Your Honor, I would like to submit several pieces of evidence and call two witnesses. Proceed, the judge directed. First, I would like to submit as evidence the security camera footage from the South Phoenix High School hallway on April 12th, between 3:15 and 3:30 p.m. Ada Walsh immediately objected. Your Honor, the defense has not provided this evidence during discovery. We have no way to verify its authenticity. Your Honor, Zarya countered, I requested this footage through a formal records request to the school district on April 13th, the day after my arrest. I received it only yesterday after having to appeal the initial denial. I have the chain of custody documentation here, as well as the records request and approval. Judge Holbrook reviewed the documents Zarya presented. The evidence appears properly obtained through official channels. Objection overruled. The court will view the footage. As the bailiff set up the video, Officer Danvers shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The footage began to play on the courtroom monitor. The silent video clearly showed Marcus walking quickly, not running toward the exit. Officer Radley appeared, grabbing Marcus roughly and pushing him against the lockers. Zarya could be seen standing at least 10 feet away, phone raised, but clearly not interfering. There was no crowd of students visible, just a few scattered observers keeping their distance. Your Honor, Zarya said, I would also like to submit as evidence the video I recorded on my phone, which was backed up to cloud storage before Officer Danvers deleted it from my device. This time, Walsh's objection was vehement. Your Honor, if such a video exists, it was obtained illegally after the phone was confiscated as evidence. Your Honor, Zarya responded calmly, my phone automatically backs up media to secure cloud storage. This happened before Officer Danvers confiscated my phone, not after. Furthermore, Officer Danvers had no warrant to search or delete contents from my phone, making his actions an illegal search and seizure under the Fourth Amendment. Judge Holbrook considered this. I'll allow the video, Ms. Monroe, but be advised that if there's evidence of tampering, there will be consequences. The second video began to play, this one with audio. It showed the same scene from Zarya's perspective, but crucially captured the audio of the encounter. "Stop running in my hallway like some criminal," Officer Radley could be heard shouting at Marcus. "I'm just trying to catch my bus, sir," Marcus replied calmly. The video continued, showing Officer Danvers' arrival. Contrary to his testimony, Zarya could clearly be heard saying, "I'm exercising my First Amendment right to record police activity in public. I'm not interfering." Officer Danvers' voice came through clearly, "Give me that phone now, or you're going to regret it." "I'm not breaking any law," Zarya's voice responded. "You people always think you know the law better than those who enforce it," Danvers could be heard saying before the video ended with him grabbing the phone. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Holbrook's expression had hardened as she looked from the video to Officer Danvers, whose face had drained of color. "Your Honor," Zarya continued, her voice steady despite the tension in the room, "I would like to call my first witness, Dr. Elijah Washington, from the Arizona State University School of Law." A distinguished man in his 60s approached the stand. After being sworn in, he introduced himself as a professor of constitutional law, specializing in First Amendment issues. Dr. Washington, based on the videos we've just seen, was I within my legal rights to record the interaction between Officer Radley and the student? Absolutely, Dr. Washington replied. The courts have consistently upheld the right of citizens to record police activity in public spaces. The First Circuit's decision in Glick vs. Cunniff established that peaceful recording of an arrest in a public space that does not interfere with the police officer's performance of their duties is not reasonably subject to limitation. The Ninth Circuit, which governs Arizona, has similarly protected this right in Fordyce v. City of Seattle. And based on the video evidence, was I interfering with the officer's duties? Not at all. You maintained a reasonable distance and were simply documenting the encounter. There was no interference visible in either video. Ada Walsh's cross-examination attempted to undermine Dr. Washington's testimony, but his credentials and knowledge of case law were impeccable. When Walsh suggested that school environments might have different standards, Dr. Washington calmly cited additional cases specifically addressing First Amendment rights in educational settings. Zarya's second witness was Marcus Washington himself, who testified that he had not been running but walking quickly to catch his bus, and that Officer Radley had used excessive force without provocation. As her final piece of evidence, Zarya presented a meticulously documented spreadsheet. Your Honor, over the past academic year, I've documented every instance where students at South Phoenix High were stopped and searched by security officers. This data shows that Black students, who make up 23% of the student body, accounted for 78% of all searches. Latino students at 31% of the population represented 67% of remaining searches. White students, who comprise 41% of the student body, accounted for less than 2% of all searches. Officer Danvers shifted uncomfortably as Zarya continued. Furthermore, I've documented 7 specific incidents where Officer Danvers has targeted students of color while ignoring similar behavior from white students. This establishes a clear pattern of discriminatory enforcement that provides context for his actions toward me. Judge Holbrook reviewed the documentation with interest. "This is quite thorough, Ms. Monroe. How did you compile this data?" "I observed and recorded every interaction I witnessed personally. For other incidents, I created an anonymous reporting system through the school newspaper, verifying each report with at least 2 independent witnesses before including it in my data set. I've included all witness statements in Appendix B." Ada Walsh objected to the relevance of this evidence, but Judge Holbrook overruled her. The pattern of enforcement is directly relevant to understanding the context of this specific incident and the credibility of the officers involved. When it came time for closing arguments, Ada Walsh attempted to salvage her case by focusing narrowly on the technical aspects of obstruction charges, avoiding any mention of the contradictions between the officer's testimony and the video evidence. Zarya's closing argument was concise and powerful. "Your Honor, the evidence presented today clearly demonstrates that I was exercising my constitutionally protected right to document potential misconduct by school security officers. The videos conclusively prove that Officer Danvers and Officer Radley provided false testimony about the distance I maintained my behavior during the incident and the words I spoke." She paused, making eye contact with Judge Holbrook. "More troublingly, Officer Danvers deleted evidence from my phone without a warrant, then misrepresented his actions to this court. This case is not simply about whether I interfered with officers' duties, which the evidence clearly shows I did not. It's about whether students, particularly students of color, have the right to document and question potential abuses of authority without facing retaliation and false charges." As Zarya concluded her closing argument, Officer Danvers leaned over to whisper something to Ada Walsh. The prosecutor's expression shifted from concern to resignation as she nodded slightly. Judge Holbrook removed her glasses, studying Zarya with newfound interest. "Ms. Monroe, I've presided over thousands of cases in this courtroom, many involving students from your school. I've rarely seen a defense presented with such thoroughness and clarity, particularly from someone representing themselves." She replaced her glasses and turned to the prosecution table. "Ms. Walsh, does the state wish to respond to the evidence presented regarding Officer Danvers' testimony and actions?" Walsh stood reluctantly. "Your Honor, in light of the video evidence, the state acknowledges that there are discrepancies in Officer Danvers' testimony. However, we maintain that the defendant's actions still constituted a disruption in a school setting which operates under different parameters than public spaces." Judge Holbrook's expression made it clear she found this argument unconvincing. "Ms. Walsh, discrepancies seems a rather generous characterization of what we've witnessed here today." Before the judge could continue, the courtroom doors opened and a man in an expensive suit entered, followed by a woman carrying a laptop. The newcomers approached the prosecution table where a hurried, whispered conversation ensued. "Your Honor," Walsh said after a moment, her expression strained, "may we request a brief recess?" Judge Holbrook checked her watch. "The court will recess for 15 minutes. As the judge left the bench, the courtroom erupted in murmurs. Zarya remained seated, watching as Officer Danvers engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion with the new arrivals. She recognized the man in the suit as Richard Harrington, the district's legal counsel. The woman she didn't know, but the way Danvers' face paled as she showed him something on her laptop suggested she brought unwelcome information. A text message lit up Zarya's phone. "You're trending. Justice for Zarya has 50K tweets. News vans outside courthouse. Marcus." Zarya's stomach tightened. She had been so focused on her case that she hadn't considered the possibility of public attention. Her grandmother would be worried sick if she saw this on the news before hearing from Zarya. When court resumed, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Richard Harrington now sat beside Ada Walsh, while Officer Danvers had moved to a seat in the gallery, his earlier smugness replaced by barely contained anger. "Your Honor," Harrington addressed the court, "the school district wishes to intervene in this matter. After reviewing the evidence presented today, we have serious concerns about the conduct of our security personnel and the charges brought against Ms. Monroe." Judge Holbrook raised an eyebrow. "This is highly unusual, Mr. Harrington. What exactly are you proposing?" "The district requests that all charges against Ms. Monroe be dismissed immediately. Furthermore, we are initiating an independent investigation into the security protocols at South Phoenix High School and the specific conduct of Officers Danvers and Radley." Ada Walsh looked relieved to have an exit strategy. "Your Honor, in light of the district's position and after further review of the evidence, the state moves to dismiss all charges against the defendant." Judge Holbrook turned to Zarya. "Miss Monroe, do you have any objection to the dismissal of charges?" Zarya stood, her mind racing. This was the outcome she had hoped for, but it felt incomplete. The systemic issues that had led to this moment would remain unaddressed if the case simply disappeared. "Your Honor, while I welcome the dismissal of charges, I believe the court should address the false testimony provided under oath and the illegal deletion of evidence from my phone. These actions represent serious misconduct that extends beyond my individual case." A ripple of surprise moved through the courtroom. Most defendants would have gratefully accepted the dismissal and fled the courthouse. Officer Danvers' face darkened with renewed anger. Judge Holbrook studied Zarya with increased interest. "Ms. Monroe raises a valid concern. Mr. Harrington, does the district's investigation intend to address these specific issues?" "It does, Your Honor. The investigation will be conducted by an independent panel that includes civil rights attorneys and community representatives. The findings will be made public and appropriate disciplinary action will be taken if misconduct is confirmed." Zarya remained standing. "Your Honor, I appreciate Mr. Harrington's assurance, but I believe judicial notice of the false testimony and Fourth Amendment violations would create an important record and ensure these issues receive proper attention." Judge Holbrook's lips curved in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Very well, Ms. Monroe. The court will take judicial notice of the significant discrepancies between Officer Danvers' sworn testimony and the video evidence presented. The court also notes the apparent Fourth Amendment violation regarding the warrantless search and deletion of content from Ms. Monroe's phone." She paused, looking directly at Officer Danvers in the gallery. "The court will refer these matters to the district attorney's office for review and potential action. Additionally, the court will provide copies of today's proceedings to the Arizona Peace Officer Standards and Training Board for their consideration." Officer Danvers stood abruptly and left the courtroom, the door closing with more force than necessary behind him. As to the charges against Ms. Monroe, Judge Holbrook continued, they are dismissed with prejudice. Ms. Monroe, you are free to go. The gavel fell with a decisive crack, but before Zarya could gather her materials, Judge Holbrook added, Ms. Monroe, may I see you in my chambers briefly? 10 minutes later, Zarya sat across from Judge Holbrook in the judge's chambers, a space lined with law books and framed diplomas. The judge had removed her robe, revealing a simple black dress and a strand of pearls. That was quite a performance in my courtroom, Ms. Monroe, Judge Holbrook said, studying Zarya with keen interest. Where did you learn to present a case like that? Zarya sat with perfect posture, her hands folded in her lap. I've been captain of the debate team for 2 years, Your Honor, and I've participated in mock trial competitions since freshman year. But mostly, I just researched extensively for this specific case. Research can only take you so far. What you demonstrated today was an innate understanding of legal strategy and courtroom dynamics that most first-year law students haven't mastered. Judge Holbrook leaned forward. Have you considered a career in law? Yes, Your Honor. I've been accepted to Stanford with a full scholarship. I plan to major in political science and then attend law school. Judge Holbrook nodded approvingly. Stanford is excellent, of course, though as a Yale Law graduate myself, I'm obligated to suggest you consider New Haven for your J.D. Zarya smiled for the first time that day. I'll keep that in mind, Your Honor. Ms. Monroe, I didn't bring you here just to discuss your educational plans. I wanted to make sure you understand what happened in that courtroom today. The charges were dismissed because the evidence contradicted the officer's testimony, Zarya replied. That's the legal outcome, yes, but there's more to it. Judge Holbrook's expression grew serious. When you walked into my courtroom this morning, a young black woman representing herself against law enforcement testimony, the deck was stacked against you in ways that have nothing to do with the law as written and everything to do with the system as practiced. She paused, making sure Zarya was following. What changed the equation wasn't just the evidence you presented, though that was compelling. It was your exceptional preparation, your composure under pressure, and your refusal to be intimidated. You forced everyone in that room, myself included, to see you not as a category or a statistic, but as a formidable intellectual force demanding justice. Zarya absorbed this, understanding the weight of what the judge was sharing. I'm telling you this because I want you to recognize what you accomplished today, and because I want you to know that while your path forward will include more obstacles than some of your peers will face, you've already demonstrated the qualities needed to overcome them. Judge Holbrook reached into her desk drawer and removed a business card. My former clerk is now a professor at Stanford Law. When you get there, look her up. Tell her Miranda Holbrook thinks she should keep an eye on you. Zarya accepted the card, tucking it carefully into her folder. Thank you, Your Honor. One more thing, Ms. Monroe. There will be media attention following this case. Officer Danvers has a history of complaints that never gained traction, but your evidence and the public nature of today's proceedings changes that dynamic. Are you prepared for that? Zarya hadn't considered this aspect fully. I'm not sure, Your Honor. My grandmother will be worried. That's understandable. But consider this, your case could help other students who face similar treatment. but lacked your resources and abilities. How you engage with that opportunity is entirely your choice, but it's a choice worth considering carefully. When Zarya emerged from the judge's chambers, she found the courthouse hallway crowded with reporters and camera crews. Standing slightly apart from the chaos was her grandmother Eloise, supported by Marcus and his parents. "Grandma," Zarya rushed to embrace the elderly woman. "How did you get here?" "Marcus's father brought me," Eloise explained, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "We saw it on the news, baby. They said you were representing yourself. I had to be here." "The charges were dismissed, Grandma. It's over." "I never doubted you for a minute," Eloise said fiercely. "Not for 1 minute." A reporter approached, microphone extended. "Zarya Monroe, can you comment on the dismissal of charges and the pending investigation into Officer Danvers?" Zarya looked to her grandmother, who nodded encouragingly. "Go ahead, baby. Speak your truth." Zarya turned to face the cameras, remembering Judge Holbrook's words about choices and opportunities. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. "What happened to me is not unique." She began, her voice clear and steady. "Students of color at South Phoenix High and schools across this country face discriminatory treatment daily. The difference in my case wasn't the injustice, it was the evidence and the platform to present it." The reporters fell silent, captivated by her composed eloquence. "I was fortunate to have the tools and knowledge to defend myself today. Many students don't. That's why the outcome of this case can't just be about my individual situation. It needs to be about systemic change in how school security operates, how student rights are protected, and how we address the documented pattern of racial bias in enforcement." A reporter called out, "Officer Danvers was overheard laughing about you representing yourself before the hearing. What would you say to him now?" Zarya paused, considering her response carefully. "I would say that underestimating people based on their age or race reflects a failure of imagination and judgment qualities that should be essential for anyone in a position of authority over young people." As the impromptu press conference continued, a woman observed from the periphery, taking notes on a tablet. When Zarya concluded her remarks and turned back to her family, the woman approached. "Ms. Monroe, I'm Aisha Johnson, education reporter for the Arizona Republic. I've been investigating disciplinary disparities in Phoenix schools for the past year. Would you be willing to speak with me about your documentation of searches at South Phoenix High? Your data could be valuable context for a series we're planning." Zarya glanced at her grandmother, who squeezed her hand supportively. "I think that would be important, Ms. Johnson. My records are thorough and verified." "Perfect. And one more thing, I understand you're headed to Stanford in the fall. My sister is an attorney with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund's education practice. They offer summer internships for promising pre-law students. Would you be interested in hearing more about that?" For the first time that day, Zarya felt the full weight of possibility opening before her. Not just the dismissal of charges, but the potential to channel this experience into meaningful action. "Yes," she said firmly, "I would definitely be interested." 3 months later, Zarya stood at a podium in the South Phoenix High School auditorium, addressing the incoming senior class during their orientation. Behind her sat Principal Chen, looking considerably less comfortable than she had in the witness stand months earlier, along with Superintendent Garcia and two new members of the school board who had been elected on platforms emphasizing student rights and equitable discipline policies. Last April, I stood alone in a courtroom because I believed that documenting injustice was not just my right, but my responsibility, Zarya told her peers. Today, none of you stands alone? She gestured to the back of the auditorium where a banner announced the formation of the Student Rights Coalition, a district-wide organization that had emerged in the wake of her case. The new security protocols being implemented this year didn't happen by accident. They happened because students spoke up, because parents demanded change, and because our community refused to accept a system that treated some students as threats rather than as learners. The investigation prompted by Zarya's case had revealed patterns of misconduct extending far beyond officers Danvers and Radley. The resulting reforms included new hiring standards for security personnel, mandatory de-escalation training, clear guidelines for student searches, and a transparent complaint process overseen by a committee that included student representatives. Officer Danvers had resigned rather than face disciplinary proceedings. Officer Radley had been reassigned to administrative duties pending completion of additional training. More significantly, the district had revised its security approach, entirely emphasizing relationship building over surveillance and enforcement. This year, for the first time, South Phoenix High will have a Student Bill of Rights prominently displayed in every classroom, Zarya continued. This document, which many of you helped create, doesn't just list your rights. It explains how to exercise them responsibly and what resources are available if you believe they've been violated. She paused, making eye contact with students throughout the auditorium. Knowledge is power, but only when it's shared and applied. That's why the Student Rights Coalition will be offering monthly workshops on topics ranging from First Amendment freedoms to the proper documentation of incidents. As Zarya concluded her remarks, she noticed a familiar figure slipping into the back of the auditorium, Judge Miranda Holbrook, who had taken an unusual interest in the reforms sparked by the case in her courtroom. The judge offered a subtle nod of approval as Zarya stepped away from the podium to enthusiastic applause. Later that afternoon, Zarya sat in a small conference room with Aisha Johnson from the Arizona Republic, reviewing the final draft of the first article in a series examining disciplinary disparities across Arizona schools. Her documentation from South Phoenix High had provided the foundation for a statewide investigation that was already prompting policy reviews in multiple districts. Your data collection methodology was remarkably sophisticated, Aisha commented, scrolling through spreadsheets on her laptop. The verification system you created for witness accounts would satisfy most academic peer review standards. Zarya smiled. I wanted it to be unassailable if it ever needed to be presented as evidence. I just didn't expect that to happen quite so dramatically. Well, it's making a difference far beyond your case. The State Board of Education has requested our complete data set for their equity task force. Aisha closed her laptop. By the way, my sister mentioned that your work during your NAACP internship this summer was exceptional. They're already talking about having you back next year. I'd like that, Zarya replied. The voting rights research I assisted with showed me how legal strategies can address systemic issues at their roots. As summer turned to fall and Zarya prepared for her departure to Stanford, she received an unexpected letter. The envelope bore the seal of the Maricopa County Courts, but the note inside was handwritten on Judge Holbrook's personal stationery. "Ms. Monroe," it read, "I thought you might be interested to know that your case has become required reading in our judicial training program on implicit bias and evidentiary evaluation. Your preparation and presentation that day continues to influence how justice is administered in our courts. Remember this: when you encounter obstacles in the years ahead, you have already changed the system from the outside. Imagine what you'll accomplish when you take your rightful place within it. I look forward to following your career with great interest. Judge Miranda Holbrook." Zarya carefully placed the letter in the keepsake box where she stored her Stanford acceptance letter, her scholarship notification, and the business cards she had collected from attorneys, journalists, and activists in the months following her case. Together, these represented not just her past victory, but the path forward she was still charting. On her final evening in Phoenix, Zarya and her grandmother sat on their small apartment balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "I'm going to miss this view," Zarya said softly. "It'll be here when you visit," Eloise assured her, "and you'll have new views to love in California." "Grandma, are you sure you'll be okay with me so far away? Maybe I should have chosen ASU instead." Eloise shook her head firmly. "Don't you dare second-guess this opportunity. I've got my health back on track. The apartment is secure now that they fixed that Medicare billing error, and I've got my church friends checking in on me. Your job is to go learn everything you can and come back ready to shake up this world even more than you already have." Zarya leaned her head against her grandmother's shoulder, thinking about the journey that had brought her to this threshold. A single moment of injustice witnessed in a school hallway had cascaded into a courtroom confrontation, which had in turn sparked reforms affecting thousands of students. What had begun as an instinctive act, raising her phone to document misconduct, had revealed a path forward she might otherwise never have discovered.